All right, here we go with the Baltimore Edgar Allan Poes. All right, Baltimore obviously had a fantastic regular season. The emergence of their quarterback, Lamar Jackson, was amazing. Did things we hadn't really seen in the NFL ever. Did it in an unorthodox manner offensively. This is a team that had a quarterback that was running for 100 yards a game on 10 carries, not always throwing for big yards, but had games where he did, scored touchdowns every which way. Their passing game was led by a 3 tight end offense, which is, again, very unique. They have moved on from one of their third tight end, a former first-round draft pick in Hayden Hurst, as he has gone on and been traded to the Atlanta Falcons. So, this team really didn't look like it had much to improve on, but, we mentioned it when we talked a little bit about New England, and we'll certainly talk about it with Tennessee. This is a team that absolutely bombed in the playoffs in losing their first game against the Tennessee Titans. A team where I think many people thought this would be the recipe that would beat them, which is with defense and running the ball well. Baltimore has made some moves here in the free agency / trade window, and we kind of already hit on some of these when we were doing our updates. They traded for defensive end Calais Campbell. He is, he's up there in years a little bit, but has continued to be a very, very productive player. They've also signed D-tackle Michael Brockers from the Los Angeles Rams, 29 years old. Again, they're building this defense. They got some age on this defense. In the beginning of the year, they were still good at, I believe, were they good at stopping the run? Yes. Their defense leveled out, but their pass defense was terrible.
Their pass defense was hurting, but then it leveled out a bit.
Their pass defense was certainly aided by the fact that they got a resurgence when they traded for Marcus Peters.
Yes.
So that's what made it possible for them to go get Jalen.
Did they already lose Jimmy Smith, or he's a free agent? I know.
I think they're looking to let Jimmy Smith go. The question is, they're aging at corner. They've got Brandon Carr, who is 34 years old for Baltimore, that is a free agent right now. Their right tackle, James Hurst, is also out there. They franchise tagged Matthew Judon, which was important. They've got some guys, Michael Pierce at D-tackle, which looks like with the signing of Brockers would be let go. He's a younger guy, very talented. Lost their inside linebacker. It's going to be tough for them to sign. Right now, they are currently negative, almost $2 million under the cap as of the latest update that they've got.
The latest. Okay, they were short anyway.
Yeah, they were tight before. They're even tighter now. So this is a team that's going to have to make some moves to get through this, but don't have a ton of big name free agents out there that are concerned. But Tony Jefferson, their strong safety, he is also a free agent. So while they made some moves to get a little better during the year last year in the back end of their defense, they are going to need to get creative. They have a late pick in the draft. I see them looking at secondary, certainly in that aspect, unless they can do something very, very creative right now. But they're going to need help. They're going to need help in the back end. We talked a little bit about their needs coming into this year: linebacker, wide receiver, and tight end. I kind of group them together because, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, that they have a very unique 3 tight end set, but they are going to need to find another playmaker in the passing game. Hollywood Brown was a good pickup for them, but it's kind of as he exploded onto the scene in the first game, when he went for 3 touchdowns against Miami, he slowed down, and really he looks to be that deep threat guy on this offense. Now, they did work the underneath with Mark Andrews, certainly was very good for them, and also with Nick Boyle kind of as the next guy helping
Hurst,
out. Well, we mentioned how Hayden Hurst is gone now. So the question is, where do they fill that space, and what can they do at receiver to really kind of upgrade that offense as we speak right now? Again, they're going to have to do a lot of this through the draft, and we're going to have to see what pieces start to fall off in free agency for them. What guys do they look? Is there guys they're looking to move? But again, they don't need a lot to be competitive. We've talked about how we believe Cincinnati is still going to stay near the bottom. Certainly there could be a press from Cleveland, but we thought that last year and it didn't happen. And Pittsburgh seems to be falling away. So what do they do?
I like that. Wide receiver, running back. Do they bring another tight end in? Maybe not. They might work with what they have and focus on bringing in a couple more receivers in hopes that, in the draft, in hopes that one of them will pan out. I do believe. I think Mark Ingram had a fine year, but I do think this is more of that. Whether it's with the 3 tight ends or it's with Jackson and or Ingram or a mix of those backs running, that's kind of their game. So, Ingram's fine. I just think that he's getting up there too. I think they're going to look for somebody eventually maybe to take over so that with their draft pick at 28, I think that they could get a really great wide receiver right there, but knowing Baltimore and Harbaugh, even though he did shift their mentality and the kind of the face or the vision of who they were going from Flacco to Lamar Jackson, I still think he's a defensive-minded guy. And, at 28, you could get, a Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma, linebacker. So, I wouldn't be surprised if instead of going with this sexy skill position with a wide receiver and or running back in the draft that they go defense right away. I could totally see that.
Yep.
The question is, again, this is more free agency conversation, but unfortunately they don't have. It's kind of similar to Pittsburgh. There's not a lot of room for them to work. You may see more guys leave than them bringing in guys, at least big name guys. Or you may see some of their big name guys have to go, and they bring a few guys back that are just pieces.
Yeah, here's the thing is, obviously their biggest cap hits, their top really 5 guys are really not cuttable. Because you franchised Judon, so you've committed to him. You just traded for Calais Campbell. You're not doing anything with that. Marcus Peters would cost them if they cut him. It would be a net negative. Earl Thomas would be a net negative, and they just signed him, so I don't see that happening. And then you got Brandon Williams would save them around $4 million at D tackle. I don't see him making that move. Your next big move would be Ronnie Staley at left tackle, who would leave no dead money with $12 million. But that being said, are you going to go and boot your first round left tackle that's done well for you? Brandon Carr, I think he's hitting against the cap right now because they have a club option on him that I don't believe they've exercised yet. He could save him $7 million right there. And again, if you believe Tavon Young, who's got an $8 million cap hit, and you just got Marcus Peters, you can let him go and probably get yourself back in good position. Willie Snead's kind of a wash right now. There's just not a lot of room for them to free up a ton of cap space. And remember, they got to sign their draft picks. So again, I look for them to go draft. They could go corner, they could go inside linebacker, they could go tackle, they could go offensive line, maybe somewhere in the middle, a guard. I think their tackle situation is pretty well set. It's a team that doesn't need to do a lot. What they are going to have to figure out, and I think they're kind of showing that with a guy like Calais Campbell, picking him up, is that they've got to get over the hump in the playoffs. Yeah. I think this is a team I think they're going to take a step back record-wise because 14-2 is pretty hard to duplicate, but I still see this team as a 10-plus win team next year, which puts them in the playoffs and likely a division winner. Yep. Now, the only thing that's interesting, and we'll go back to the CBA, and this will be kind of interesting, is
bring in the CBA.
Even though the 17-game schedule doesn't come into play immediately, the 7 playoff teams does. Mm-hmm. So the bye they received this year as the number 1 team was critical, but if they fall out of that bye, they now play in the first round of the playoffs. So let's see how that kind of starts to ruffle some feathers there with people and how they work with things. So I don't know. Is there anything you think I'm missing there? I agree with all your spots where they got to look. The question is, how do they do it? Because they really have to do it through the draft at this point. I think they've shot their shot with Brockers right now, and it seems like Carr would be one to walk to give them that, get them back under the cap situation, and then still have flexibility to sign a first rounder. The good part is their first rounder will be slotted in a position that won't bury them because they're picking so late.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, I think that they're going to end up. It's hard to talk free agency so much about them just because of the strain they're in. You know,
Yep.
I mean, again,
Yep.
I'm going to repeat it. I think you'll see more guys going from them than coming in, or at least more big names going. If other guys come in, it's going to be some of the Calais Kim, who has a name, but he's older. Might be older guys that they can get on a year deal, or a little bit less expensive.
Yeah. And
But
they can restructure too. That's the other part.
They don't have too much and especially critical needs, because they were able to do what they did last year from the skill position level with what they had, that they're going to pretty much have back this year, right?
Yep.
So I think they're going to, this is a draft team. This is a team that's just going to try to improve who they are in the draft, try to make room in the free agency market, and just so they can sign their draft picks and not be in the negative, and make moves and try to find some good picks in the draft. And I think it's going to start at least at number 28 in round 1 with defense. It's not going to be that sexy player. I could be wrong. I think they could, again, get a good wide receiver right there, but I just think it's going to be defense. I think they could pick up a good linebacker or someone on the back end in the secondary, another cornerback or safety.
Yep.
You're going to be able to find one at 28 that's probably pretty good, because though I feel like the defensive backfield class in this year's draft isn't as maybe vast as it has been in the past years, or at least riddled with guys that you're like, whoa, that's some great talent. I mean, a guy like Grant Delpit is slotted right around that time. They could grab a guy like that at 28 and have a guy and then develop them on a defense that they develop their guys decently. They don't. The typically guys that go to that are drafted to defense to Baltimore are at least are average or above. They're not shit shows. So I mean, that's where I think they're going to go. I just think they're going to go. You're going to find some guys. Again, there may not be a ton in the defensive backfield in this year's draft, but there's also not a lot of huge sexy names. So Okuda was probably going to go top 5 is what's expected. But after that, in terms of safety and in terms of corner, there's not anyone that jumps off the page. There's guys from Alabama. There's a kid from Florida. But they're not like, boom, like a Minka Fitzpatrick or a Marcus Peters and things like that.
Yep.
So, and we've seen in past years, there's been some pretty hefty, draft classes that in the whether it be corner or safety or a mix of both.
Yep.
And big names at that. So I that's just kind of what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like they could bring exactly a guy like that. That's the guy that keeps like coming up in his name in lights based on where I see some of these mocks have him slotted at, not necessarily to Baltimore, but in terms of, he's around that 25 to 30 draft position in this class is what some people are saying. Now that'll, all that could be out the window if there's all of a sudden a run on that position. But his name keeps popping in my head. Put a Grant Delpit on that team, and that's a pretty damn good piece for your first pick.
Yep.
Even at 28. So I don't know. I mean, I think they're pretty well set. I agree with you. I think they're at least a 10-win team. I don't think, though people figure Lamar Jackson out, seen this kid for a long time. I think he'll get better too. Okay, he might not be as crazy. Well, I take that back, man. I mean, the kid they can figure him out as much as you want, but just when you think you have him, he's the wet noodle.
Yep.
Okay, I mean, I'm telling you, this guy. Oh, so all right, good. Does that wrap us up on Baltimore?
I think that wraps us up.
We go from the AFC North that we wrap up on to the AFC South. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you as always
On the gridiron.